Not only are men terrible outdoor leaders, they intentionally put people in danger. I knew this was a thing. I had heard guides talk about this, raft guides. I was a raft guide for 6 years in Washington State, in New Mexico, and in Wyoming, in Jackson Hole. But most of that time was in New Mexico. Male raft guides that I have encountered in my life, the most irresponsible, selfish, broken, like messed up people I have ever met. They're almost sociopathic in how reckless they are. And I had heard, I always thought they were joking. I thought it was a joke. I was like, surely someone could not do this seriously. That they were purposely flipping their boats. One, because they're bored. And it's way more fun to have a wild ride if some people go into the water. But even worse yet, a lot of them were doing this. And I doubt many people will admit this. But I have definitely heard them talk about it and they joke. But I now know that men's jokes are never jokes. They're projection. They are fantasies they want to do. Or a lot of times they are literally admissions of guilt, right? And so some men would purposely flip their raft so that then they could save people and get better tips. Because raft guides depend on tips a lot. And you better believe your tip is going to be huge. If you pulled someone out of the water, someone who thought they were going to drown, you're going to get a huge tip. Now, I'm not saying that is the motive behind every flip. It's usually not. I would say most of these men are doing this because they're bored, they're reckless, and they want to have fun. But they don't care who pays the price for their boredom and their fun. And what made me think of this was this comment that was left by someone who follows me on YouTube. And wherever you're seeing this, please follow me over there. My days on TikTok are numbered because I don't get paid and I can barely pay my bills. And at least YouTube pays me. Not great, but it's better than literally $2 a day. Anyway, this person's story, you can pause and read the whole thing if you want. Talking about how they went into the water and how the guide purposely ran into a rock at full speed ahead. And then, everyone went in the water as it flipped. And that she was one of the people underneath the raft. And if you've never been underneath a raft in whitewater, it's terrifying. Especially if you are not working in whitewater and don't know. Do you know what I mean? Like, I know that it's actually safer to be right under an air pocket because at least there's air. But it's terrifying. You can't see anything. You don't know where the rocks are. You don't know if you're going to hit a strainer. You don't know what is going to happen. It's terrifying. And she talks about how the guide had gone into like how dangerous rafting was. Of course, the guide laughed it off, like all this stuff, right? And this part right here, I kept telling him before we launched how important it was for us to follow his paddling instructions, right? Now, a little part of me is going to give that man the benefit of the doubt. Let me tell you why. Sometimes you do purposely hit rocks because there is a very thin line. It is like dancing with rocks. And sometimes you have to hit a rock on purpose to bounce off of it and spin around and it turns you into the direction. Like it is so complicated, especially when you're in water with a ton of rocks and especially low water. There's one place on the Rio Grande where at low water, you literally have to hit it sideways. It's the only way your boat's gonna fit. And everyone has to lean into the rock so that you don't flip, right? Like there is strategy behind this, but I can't imagine a scenario where you purposely slam as hard as you can into a rock, especially knowing that it flipped, right? So, this is why I think a lot more men are doing this than I realize. And before I show you men admitting to doing this online, I also want to share that one of the reasons why I was terrified on the river every single day, I can't believe I did that job for 6 years. I was terrified every single day. My first day in the Rio Grande, my first day as a paddle guide, which is much different than oars, right? My first day in like class 3 and 4, it was high water. First day in the state of New Mexico, literally just moved there the night before, slept on the floor of a barn, and then got up and went down the river. First trip, first day, someone drowns right in front of my face. And it's a private boater led by a man who obviously did not tell his crew what to expect, didn't give them proper life vests, and then me and all my coworkers are, I'm not doing chest compressions because we all had different jobs. So like the people who were more experienced were doing this for an hour, breathing into their mouth. And then we had to do a Z pulley system to get her body up the cliff. And she died right in front of her daughter. That traumatized me. And from that moment on, I was like, I was terrified, but I kept doing it. But I was really good at teaching people how to paddle. I knew that people didn't trust me. I knew that men especially would fight me and turn my boat and literally sabotage every line I made. So I was a complete bitch. It was good for me because I'm not used to being that way. I'm usually like a people pleaser, shy little white girl from Tennessee who just smiles even when I'm full of rage. But I learned how to be direct and like, no, blah, right? I became like a different person, which was actually a really great thing for me. I remember some of the other guides were constantly, talking about how they would want to get clients out of the boat, especially if they're jerks that, oops, I accidentally hit this rock, so they pop out. Like they were messing with people all the time. And then a lot of them would like surf things and whatever. I was like such a killjoy. I was not here to take any chances. I'm here to have fun. But my number one priority is to keep people safe physically, but just as important, emotionally and mentally. And so many of these men are like, whatever, nothing's gonna happen. It's for fun. And also I know as a woman that a lot of people who may agree, if they say, let's flip the boat, can we flip the boat? That some women are gonna agree, or some men, because they're performing masculinity and don't wanna look like a coward, that people are oftentimes going to agree to something that they don't feel comfortable with if they're outnumbered. And so a lot of these people who may have even consented to flipping on purpose, I guarantee you there's at least one person in that boat who did not want to flip in every single boat that's probably ever flipped. Okay, maybe that's too big of a generalization, but a lot of people lie about how comfortable they are with things because they don't want to look like the downer, the coward, but really the voice of reason. So I found this article, to flip or not to flip, like shamelessly talking about the pros and cons of flipping on purpose. And you can pause to read this if you want, but they're like, hey, if you don't know if you should flip your raft on purpose, like maybe think about not, because, my best friend who said he wanted to flip, like they ended up flipping and it was terrifying. The fact that they're even asking this, how do you know if you want to flip the boat? I have never in my life wanted to flip a boat unless we were literally practicing in some sort of recovery situation, or if I'm in like flat water. I'm sorry, look at this. This is why for a lot of guys it's hard to know if they can purposely flip the boat or not to give the customer an adventurous ride. Usually it's safer not to flip the raft or flip it in calm water. It's usually safer not to flip the raft. Usually, it's always. But then they're all like, but you know what? The best flip is the unintentional one that happens when everyone's expecting it. Yeah, that's also the most terrifying. Like I said in my last video, I have flipped twice in 6 years. Both of those were very hard for me because the water was so cold, my lungs froze up and I was trying to give orders and nothing came out of my mouth. And I was rendered powerless. I swam hard, I got to my boat, but I couldn't give commands or tell them what to do because I was freezing and my voice closed, my throat closed. I do not ever want to experience that again. Sometimes you want to flip so bad. You do everything right to flip, but it just doesn't happen. Fork! Y'all, God, sociopaths. And we call men great leaders. What? This was another thing I found. This is so dumb. What's the best part of your job? Well, there's a few rappers where we can mix it up a bit, sort of show off. Part of it is a challenge of being able to pull off these different tricks, like surfing on hydraulics, popping up or jumping on top of the big wave. Many times we flip the rafts on purpose if the customers don't mind. Fork you. Do you have any idea how hard it is for a customer to say, I mind, please don't do that? And see, a lot of men may never be able to admit this. But ask any woman if she's ever, I don't know, been in bed with a dude and was afraid to say no. Like, ask any child if their parent was like, you're okay with this, right? And they were like, yeah, When you have somebody who is the leader, like in a teacher situation or a parent situation, or someone who has more power than you, and you are vulnerable to them, the way it's like hooking up with men, because at the end of the day, they can overpower me. They can snap my neck in half. And so ask any woman especially, or anyone who's ever been a child, or anyone who's ever been a student, how easy it is to say, excuse me, I'm a little scared of flipping. They're not going to do that. Only the really brave one is going to do that. And then when they were asked, what is the worst part of the job? Well, sometimes accidents happen. Can you even call them accidents if you were this reckless on purpose? And then look at this. It really does break my heart when sometimes someone wants to get off the boat or off the river mid-trip. The bus driver comes, picks them up, and they just have to wait there. It happened to me a few times, and it's hard to deal with. It's so hard to deal with my own rejection. The consequences of me being a reckless man who they don't trust. Those people paid to have a good time, and now they're too scared to go on. It's really crappy feeling. I love the way this man is centering himself. It feels so bad for me. I feel so bad for me that they don't get to go rafting because then, me. I promise you, not many people. I think the only time I was ever on a trip where someone got off in the middle of the trip was the trip someone literally died. Half of the people on that course were like, I don't want to go on. I didn't know if people could die. That is literally the only time I've ever seen people get off. So if this happens to this dude a lot, my guess, I'm not saying, that it doesn't happen in just other situations where people are scared. But this man is probably not a safe person. And he had no problem going on record, on the internet, sharing that he does this. He even admits, I flipped my raft 4 times in 1 2-hour trip. I really like to try to cater each trip to the individual group I'm taking because after all, they're the ones paying. No, you should cater your trip to the most scared person on your raft. When I was a guide for Outward Bound, the person who is struggling the most set the pace. That is good. Oh my God. Men should not be able to lead literally anything, but especially not this stuff. And then he talks about, when we don't have customers around, we do all this crazy stuff. Flipping the raft every chance we get. Do you see why I almost never went down the river with them for fun? Only a few times, because I see how they do on the clock with customers. I do not want to be anywhere near y'all when you don't have like the company and possibly a lawsuit breathing down your neck. But in case you want to know who it is, it's this dude. And this was found in the Art of Manliness community, whatever that is. I mean, I looked at it and it doesn't sound like that toxic and crazy, but the fact that they put this in there, this is what we're teaching men. Like, this dude's bragging, and they actually published this. These are men's role models. What? This and Alex Honnold, who has a baby on the way and a 2-year-old and a wife and is like, well, I'm not going to stop soloing. Duh. But just so y'all know what happens when you fall out of the raft. So this came on. This is on the Sierra Rescue page. One of the most challenging situations that a group of whitewater rafters faces is an upside down raft. No matter where the flip is, it is most likely that at least one of the people in the swift water is terrified. Okay? It is so unlikely that everyone's just cool. And here's the thing. So many people think that they're going to be chill and cool, calm, and collected in an emergency situation, and that is almost never the case. We called them, what would we call them? The dead squirrel or something? We had a name for them. They would fall out of the boat, and then you're like telling them what to do so they don't go into this, the toilet bowl or some place where there's an undercut rock or something that could be very dangerous. And they're just like, la, la, la. They're having trauma responses. A lot of them freeze up. A lot of them don't think that it's serious. But in general, most people do not handle emergency situations, the way they think they're going to handle it, especially men. Especially men. Passengers go from being on top of this huge rubber floating object to now being submerged into a completely unfamiliar environment with the challenge not only of being underwater for a certain amount of time, because you may be under for a while. You have hopefully a very buoyant PFD, personal flotation device, but still, sometimes you will stay under longer than you can imagine. And I'm not trying to scare people away from rafting companies, or like, I loved being on the river. But honestly, you need to read reviews. You need to find out who is the safest company in that town. And honestly, I would always go with a woman, especially a veteran guide. Anyway, but also having to deal with the surface water waves and obstacles and disorientation when being at face level with the river. It is so different being in the river versus being on top on a boat. And this is the most important part right here. If the water is cold, we now know that fear or anger combined with cold water can create extreme heart stress in the form of cold water shock. This is why we have people having heart attacks out there. This situation should never be taken lightly. It requires a good pre-plan as well as the cooperation and assistance of every other raft on that trip to make this a short and comfortable situation for everyone. When you have old people go in the water, it's terrifying because you don't know how their heart is going to handle that shock. When you have children go in the water, when you have someone scared go in the water, when you have someone panicking in the water, it is so scary. I cannot imagine. God, I can't imagine someone being like, I'm going to put myself and everyone in this situation on purpose because I'm bored and I want a good tip and I want to be a hero. And this is what this all reminds me of. And I think just to make this a broader lesson, a lot of men will put women in dangerous situations so they can be a hero. Not necessarily to get a tip, obviously, but so that they look good. So they can be a hero. They will literally put you in a situation that is so dangerous. Like, please stop trusting men. Please stop trusting any man who has not proven otherwise through consistent behavior. Please do not go rafting with men for fun. Go with a professional company and a guide and make sure that you read the reviews. Ask the bus driver for the most experienced guide because I cannot tell you. Oh, by the way, the first day of my last season on the river, first day, someone died. And this was a company death, another company. And I was like, okay, that's it. I'm done. I'm so afraid of worrying about people dying. I'm so afraid of seeing men kill people on this river. It's men killing. I'm not saying a woman is never her fault, but I will say that the mindset of toxic masculinity, especially in the outdoor industry, and a lot of these men have addictions. They're right before they go down, which makes them less jerks because they're not angry, but they're not necessarily there. One of the guides that I used to work with carried a literal pew-pew in his dry bag because he was a paranoid crazy man. Most of these men, I'm friends with a lot of the men that I guided with, but I would never go anywhere near a lot of the men that I guided with because they are broken men. Most of them come from trauma. None of them are dealing with it. And they use the excitement and the adrenaline and the power trips that they get from being guides and scaring the crap out of people. They use that to avoid themselves and their sad, dead inside lives. And you know what? Let them do that, but do not be a victim of their unhealedness, of their recklessness, because so many of them will only learn a lesson from a dead body. Don't let it be you.